The lab was my sanctuary. It smelled of salt, formaldehyde, and the clean, metallic scent of sterilized equipment. Outside, the world was a frantic rush of deadlines and social pressures. But in here, under the cool, humming fluorescent lights, the universe shrank to the specimen under my microscope. The intricate, crystalline structure of a diatom, a single-celled artist of the ocean. It was beautiful. It was orderly. It made sense. The rest of my life was a chaotic mess of refreshing my email inbox every 7 minutes. I nudged the focus dial. My breath held. Come on, Sloan. Concentrate. But my mind was miles away, floating in the digital ether, waiting for one specific message. A message from the Estellan Foundation. It held my future in its encrypted hands. A full-ride postgraduate scholarship in marine biology. The culmination of 4 years of relentless work, of late nights in this very lab, of sacrificing a normal college social life for the silent, patient company of plankton and research papers. It was everything. My phone buzzed on the counter, a harsh, demanding sound that broke the sterile peace. I glanced at the screen. Mom. A familiar sense of dread, cold and heavy, settled in my stomach. A call from my mother, Tinsley, was never just a call. It was a summons, an event, a harbinger of some new, self-inflicted drama she expected me to navigate. I sighed and answered, "Hi, Mom." "Sloan, sweetie." Her voice was a symphony of artificial brightness, stretched thin over a baseline of anxiety. "How's my little genius? Still staring at your little sea bugs?" "They're microorganisms, Mom. And yes, I'm in the lab."
What's up?
"Well, honey, your father and I need you to come home this weekend. There's something very important we need to discuss with you as a family." The phrase "as a family" was always a red flag. In our house, it meant a unilateral decision had been made, and I was about to be informed of the consequences. "Is everything okay?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Everything is, well, it's complicated, sweetie. It's better if we talk in person, Saturday. Be here by noon." It wasn't a request. I closed my eyes, picturing the house. The sprawling, white modernist box on the water. It was. Less a home and more a portfolio piece. A monument to my father's success in speculative real estate and my mother's success in spending it. A place of gleaming surfaces and zero comfort. "I have a lot of work to do, Mom. Midterms are coming up." "This is more important than midterms, Sloan," she said, her voice losing its forced cheer and taking on a sharper, impatient edge. "This is about your future. Be here." The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long moment. "This is about your future." The words echoed in the silent lab, laced with an irony so thick I could taste it. My future was sitting in an unread email on a server somewhere, waiting. A future I had built for myself, brick by painstaking brick. What new crisis had they manufactured now? The 2-hour train ride from my gritty, vibrant college town to their manicured, sterile suburb felt like a journey between 2 different planets. I spent the ride rereading my application thesis, my fingers crossed so tightly they ached. I stepped off the train and into my father's waiting Tesla, the interior smelling of new leather and a faint, cloying air freshener shaped like a dollar sign that hung from the rearview mirror. "Sloan, why?" My father, Chad, boomed, turning down the EDM that was blasting from the speakers. He was dressed in what he called his weekend casuals, a golf shirt with the logo of a club we couldn't afford, linen trousers, and boat shoes, despite the fact we were miles from any boat. "You're looking thin. Not feeding you at that school?" "Hi, Dad. I'm fine. Just studying hard." "Attack girl," he said, pulling out into traffic with a jerk. "Good thing, too. Got to keep those grades up. Every penny counts." I glanced at the brand new smartwatch on his wrist, a model that had been released 2 weeks prior. Every penny counts. The house was, as always, aggressively modern and spotlessly clean. My mother tensely greeted me at the door with a hug that was more of an air kiss maneuver designed not to wrinkle her silk blouse. She was a woman who was perpetually braced for a photo shoot that was never going to happen. "Sweetie, you look tired," she said, her eyes scanning my simple jeans and university sweatshirt with faint disapproval. Come in, come in. We'll talk in the living room." The living room was a cavern of white leather sofas, chrome, and glass. A single, enormous, abstract painting, a chaotic slash of red on a white canvas, hung on the wall. My mother had told me it was a significant investment. It looked like the painter had tripped. They sat me down on one of the sofas. The leather was cold against my skin. They took their positions opposite me, sitting close together. A practice tableau of unity and solemnity. This was it. The performance was about to begin. My father cleared his throat. He leaned forward, lacing his fingers together in a way he probably saw a CEO do in a movie. "Sloan," he began, his voice low and serious. "You know your mother and I have always supported your dreams. 100%. We've been your biggest cheerleaders." I thought of the science fairs they'd missed, the award ceremonies they'd skipped for a weekend trip to Napa. I said nothing. "And we are so proud of you," my mother chimed in, placing a hand on my father's arm. Her eyes were wide and glistening with unshed tactical tears. "Our brilliant, brilliant daughter. Here it comes. The wind-up before the pitch. But the market. It's been brutal, Sloan. Why?" my dad said, shaking his head slowly. "Just brutal. A real downturn. We've had to make some difficult choices. We've had to tighten our belts significantly." I glanced at the new diamond tennis bracelet on my mother's wrist, a recent birthday gift. It winked under the recessed lighting. A very tight belt, indeed. "What we're trying to say, sweetie," my mother said, her voice cracking with practiced emotion, "is that we've hit a bit of a rough patch. We've looked at the numbers, we've gone over everything, and, well, there's no easy way to say this." She looked at my father, who picked up the cue perfectly. He took a deep breath and looked me square in the eye. His expression was a carefully crafted mask of paternal regret. "We're broke, sweetie." The words hung in the vast, silent room. Broke. It was a word so absurd in this context, so utterly disconnected from the reality of the multi-million-dollar house we were sitting in, that I almost laughed. Broke was my roommate, working too. Jobs to cover her rent and eating ramen noodles 4 nights a week. Broke was not this. "I don't understand," I said, my voice quiet. "There's nothing to understand," my father said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's just numbers, and the numbers right now are not good. Which means, and believe me, this is killing us, we can't afford your tuition for next year. We can't keep your college fund going." There it was. The guillotine had fallen. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It wasn't shock. Deep down, I think I'd been expecting something like this my whole life. My existence had always been secondary to their lifestyle, an expense to be managed. So what am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice betraying none of the cold fury that was beginning to build in my chest. "It's my final year." "We know, honey, and our hearts are breaking," my mother said, finally squeezing out a single perfect tear that traced a path down her cheek without smudging her makeup. Maybe you could take a year off, get a job, save up. Lots of people do that. Or transfer to a state school." My dad offered. "It's practically free." They had it all figured out. My future dismantled and rearranged for their convenience. The years of work, the specialized program, my research, my thesis, all of it a line item on their budget that had just been cut. I looked at them, really looked at them. At their expensive clothes, their glowing tans from a recent trip to the Bahamas, their faces full of false sorrow. And I felt the last. Vestiges of my childhood illusions crumble into dust. The hurt was there, a deep, painful ache. But beneath it, something else was hardening. Resolve. Okay, I said. The single word surprised them. They had been prepared for tears, for screaming, for a fight. They weren't prepared for quiet acceptance. My father's face flooded with relief. See, Tins? I told you she'd be understanding. She gets it. She's a smart kid. Oh, Sloan, thank you for being so mature about this, my mother gushed. I knew you would. They thought they had won. They thought I had folded. The worst was over for them. Actually, my dad said, his mood suddenly buoyant. He stood up, a wide grin spreading across his face. Now that the bad news is out of the way, we do have a little bit of good news. Something to cheer us all up. Come on. He gestured for us to follow him through the massive sliding glass doors that led to the backyard. My mother, her tears miraculously gone, bounced on the balls of her feet with excitement. I followed them out onto the sprawling limestone patio. My father strode proudly across the perfectly manicured lawn, which rolled down to the glittering water of the inlet. You see, he said, chest puffed out. Your mother and I were thinking. Vacations are so expensive these days. Flights, hotels, it all adds up. So we decided to make a long-term investment to save money in the future. He stopped at the edge of their private dock, and I saw it. It wasn't a little something, it was a yacht. A brand new, gleaming white, ostentatiously large yacht. It had to be at least 50 feet long. It bobbed gently in the water, a monument to selfishness and breathtaking hypocrisy. Sunlight glinted off the polished chrome railings. It was the most beautiful, most hateful thing I had ever seen. Painted in elegant gold script on the stern was its name. Our nest egg. I stared. I just stared. The audacity of it was magnificent. It was a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. They had just told me with straight faces that they were broke, that they couldn't afford my education, the one thing I had ever truly asked of them. And here, floating in the water behind them, was the reason why. A multi-million-dollar toy. What do you think? My mother chirped, clapping her hands together. Isn't she a beauty? We're having a little christening party for her tomorrow night. Just a few friends. It'll be fun. A way to forget all this unpleasantness. I looked from the yacht to their beaming, expectant faces, and I felt no anger. Not anymore. The anger had burned away, leaving behind a cold, clear, perfect calm. In that moment, I didn't see my parents. I saw two deeply unserious, selfish children who had just handed me the keys to my own freedom. They had severed the last string of obligation I felt towards them. It's amazing, I said, my voice flat. Congratulations. I turned and walked back into the house, leaving them cooing over their new toy. I went up to my childhood bedroom, a pastel pink museum of a girl I no longer was. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened it. My hands were perfectly steady. I clicked on my email. The inbox loaded. And there it was, a single new message. The subject line made my heart stop. A Stellan Foundation postgraduate scholarship, official notification. I clicked it open. My eyes scanned the text, the formal language, the paragraphs of congratulations. And then I saw the words. It is with great pleasure that we offer you the 2025 Stellan Foundation Scholarship, which provides for full tuition, room and board, all associate academic fees, and a personal research stipend for the duration of your postgraduate studies. Full ride, everything. They were giving me everything. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled me, washed over my entire body. I had done it on my own. I didn't need them. I didn't need their tainted, unreliable college fund. I had my own future bought and paid for with my own hard work. The relief was quickly followed by another feeling, a sharp, delicious, and utterly ruthless idea. My mother's words echoed in my head. We're having a little christening party for her tomorrow night. Just a few friends. A party. A stage. An audience of all their wealthy, judgmental friends who they were so desperate to impress. They wanted to show off their new yacht, the symbol of their supposed wealth. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't even going to tell them, not yet. I was going to let them have their party. I would play the part of the dutiful, disappointed daughter. I would let them toast their success, their new boat, their clever investment. And then, when the moment was just right, I would make an announcement of my own. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of my faculty advisor, my mentor, the woman who had guided me through the whole process. Dr. Sharma? Sloan, any news? Her voice was warm and kind. You could say that, I said, looking out my window at the ridiculous yacht, at our nest egg. I got it. The Estellan. I heard her sharp intake of breath, followed by a whoop of joy. Sloan, that's incredible. I knew it. I am so proud of you. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I couldn't have done it without you. Nonsense. She said, they didn't give you your future, Sloan. You earned it. Don't you ever forget that. A single happy tear, a real one, rolled down my cheek. Don't worry, I said, my voice low and steady. I won't, and I have a feeling neither will my parents. After the call with Dr. Sharma, I sat in the stillness of my room for a long time, letting the reality of the Estellan scholarship sink in. It felt like a shield, a key, a declaration of independence I hadn't even known I was writing. The low thrum of anxiety that had been my constant companion for months had vanished, replaced by a calm, humming certainty. I finally had ground to stand on that wasn't owned by my parents. Eventually, I knew I had to go back downstairs. The performance wasn't over. It was just entering its second act. I schooled my features, erasing the triumphant smile and replacing it with a carefully constructed mask of somber resignation. I practiced in the mirror, softening my eyes, letting my shoulders slump just so. It was disturbingly easy. I'd been playing a part for them my whole life. This was just a different role. I found them in the kitchen, which looked like a showroom for a high-end appliance company. They were leaning against a massive marble island, sipping glasses of wine, their heads close together. They looked up as I entered, their faces a mixture of relief and cautious pity. Oh, sweetie, my mother said, rushing over to me. Are you okay? I know that was a lot to take in. I'm okay, I said, my voice quiet. Just processing. That's our girl, my dad boomed, swirling his wine, resilient. That's a sterling trait. He seemed to have completely forgotten that my name wasn't actually Sterling, but that was Chad for you, all broad strokes, no details. Look, Sloan Y, I know this seems rough right now, but trust me, in the long run, this is a good lesson. In fiscal reality. This from a man who once bought a vintage pinball machine because he thought it would appreciate in value. It was now gathering dust in the 3-car garage next to a set of golf clubs he'd never used. I understand, I said, looking at the floor. It was a lie, but it was the lie they needed to hear. My mother placed a cool hand on my arm. Your father is right, and we will help you in any way we can, sweetie. We're a team. She smiled, a bright, brittle thing. Actually, I was just clearing out my closet the other day. There are some designer bags I never use anymore. You could probably sell them on one of those little internet sites. Make a pretty penny. It could be a fun project for you on your year off. The sheer, breathtaking condescension of it almost made me gasp. She was offering me her cast-offs, her table scraps, as a solution to the problem she had created. I felt a laugh, sharp and hysterical, bubble up in my throat, but I choked it down. "Thanks, Mom," I said, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. "That's thoughtful," they beamed. I was being mature. I was being reasonable. I was making this easy for them. They were off the hook. The rest of the day was a surreal parade of their oblivious extravagance. A catering truck arrived, and an army of staff in crisp black uniforms began ferrying trays and equipment into the house. Then came the florist, with arrangements of white orchids and lilies, so large they looked like they belonged in a hotel lobby. A bartender began setting up a full bar on the patio, polishing glasses and lining up bottles of premium liquor. I sat in a corner of the living room, pretending to read a book, but really, I was just watching, observing. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were an anthropologist studying the bizarre rituals of a lost tribe. They were spending more on a single party for a boat than they were willing to spend on the final year of my education. Every floral arrangement, every bottle of champagne, every tray of canapes was another piece of evidence, another justification for what I was about to do. My father strode through the preparations, shouting orders and feeling important. "Make sure the view is properly chilled," he'd bellow. "And I want the jumbo shrimp, not the colossal. There's a texture difference," he caught. My eye and winked as if letting me in on a secret. "Got to put on a good show, Sloanway. Appearances are everything in my business." "You understand." "I'm beginning to," I said quietly. That evening, I went to my room to get ready. I bypassed the sad, worn-out clothes of my student life. I also ignored the frilly, age-inappropriate dresses my mother had bought for me over the years, attempts to mold me into her own image. Instead, I chose my armor. It was a simple, dark teal dress I had bought for a university awards dinner. It was modest, with clean lines and a classic cut. It wasn't flashy or expensive, but it was elegant. It was the dress of a serious person, a professional. It was a dress that said, "I am not a child." I pulled my hair back into a sleek, low ponytail and put on a pair of simple silver earrings. Looking in the mirror, I saw not the disappointed daughter they expected, but a woman they didn't know at all. And I was ready. The party was in full swing by the time I came downstairs. The patio and lawn were crowded with my parents' friends, a sea of tanned skin, white teeth, and expensive fabrics. The air was thick with competing perfumes and the loud braying. Laughter of men who talked about their stock portfolios like they were sports teams. It was my own personal hell. My parents were in their element. My father was holding court by the bar, a glass of scotch in one hand, gesturing expansively. With the other, my mother drifted through the crowd like a monarch butterfly, bestowing air kisses and accepting compliments on her home, her dress, her flawless party-throwing skills. She spotted me and immediately swooped in, grabbing my hand. "There. You are sweetie? Come, you have to say hello to the Weatherbys." She dragged me over to a leathery couple who looked like they'd been surgically attached to the deck of a cruise ship. "Cynthia, Bob, you remember our Sloan?" my mother trilled. Cynthia Weatherby's eyes, ringed with thick black liner, scanned me from head to toe. "Of course." "My goodness, you're all grown up. What are you studying again, dear?" "Pottery?" "Marine biology," I said, my voice polite. "Oh, how?" "Quaint," Cynthia said, before turning back to my mother. Tensely, I am simply dying over the new boat, a 50-footer. Chad is a legend. My mother patted my arm, her expression a perfect blend of pride and full maternal concern for the benefit of her audience. "She's being so brave about everything, aren't you, sweetie? We had to have a little chat about the economy." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know how it is. Sometimes the children have to learn that money doesn't grow on trees. Bob Weatherby nodded sagely. Toughest lesson, but the most important one. Builds character. I smiled, a tight, empty smile, letting their patronizing words wash over me. Just a little longer, I told myself. The stage is almost set. Finally, the moment arrived. My father, his face flushed with alcohol and self-importance, clinked a knife against a champagne flute to get everyone's attention. The crowd quieted, turning toward the dock where he and my mother stood, beaming. Friends, neighbors. He began, his voice booming across the lawn. Thank you all for coming to celebrate with us. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. He gestured to the yacht behind him. Chad, in this economy? Are you crazy? He let out a hearty laugh. And I say, these are the times when you have to be smart. You have to invest in real, tangible assets. Things that will hold their value. Things that bring the family together. My mother gazed at him adoringly, a perfect picture of the supportive wife. These are tough times, my father continued, his voice taking on a somber, philosophical tone. And tough times call for tough decisions. They call for sacrifice. Tinsley and we've had to make some of those tough decisions lately. For the good of the family. For the good of our financial future. He raised his glass high. So I want to propose a toast. To prudence. To smart investments. And to our beautiful new boat. A symbol of our commitment to a secure future. To our nest egg. A chorus of "To our nest egg" echoed from the crowd. People cheered and clapped as my father popped the cork on a magnum of champagne, letting the foam spray dramatically into the air. He and my mother kissed for the crowd. It was their moment of triumph. The applause began to die down. The guests started to turn back to their conversations. This was my moment. The eye of the hurricane. I took a deep breath and stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I pitched my voice so it was clear and steady, and it cut through the murmuring chatter. Dad, Mom? They turned, looking surprised to see me. My father's smile was wide, indulgent. Sloan, what's up, kiddo? Want to say a few words? He chuckled, as if the idea of me having anything important to say was adorable. Actually, yes, I said, walking calmly to stand beside them, facing their friends. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on me. That was a beautiful speech, Dad, and I'm so glad everyone is here to celebrate your prudent investment. I let the word hang in the air for a second. I turned to the crowd. It's funny you were all just talking about building character and tough financial lessons. Because, as my parents just shared with me, they're going through a bit of a rough patch. I saw my mother's smile begin to tighten at the corners. My father's expression shifted from indulgence to confusion. And because they've had to make so many sacrifices, I continued, my voice smooth as glass. They unfortunately had to cut off my college fund. They told me I'll have to take a year off to work, to save up for my own tuition. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. I saw Cynthia Weatherby's eyebrows shoot up. The guests exchanged glances, their minds visibly connecting. The dots between the 50-foot yacht and the broke student sob story. I turned to my parents. Their smiles were completely gone, replaced by matching masks of horror. They looked like two deer caught in the headlights of a freight train. But I knew I couldn't let their financial situation derail my own future. I said, my voice ringing with a newfound strength. I knew I had to be responsible and secure my own funding. So I did. I stood up a little taller. This was the moment. The culmination of everything. And I'm thrilled to announce, in front of all of you who are here celebrating financial security, that I have just been awarded the Estellan Foundation Scholarship. I paused, letting the name sink in. A few of the more academically inclined guests gasped. The Estellan was legendary. It's a full-ride postgraduate scholarship. I clarified for those who didn't know, my voice clear and unwavering. It covers my full tuition, my room and board, all my university fees, and includes a rather generous research stipend for the entire duration of my studies. I looked directly at my stunned parents. So I just wanted to say thank you, Mom and Dad, I said, my voice dripping with a sweetness that was sharper than any knife. Your recent hardship was just the motivation I needed to go out and earn my future for myself. So I guess this boat really is a good investment. No one spoke, not a single person. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the hull of the yacht. The party, the music, the laughter, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a silence that was so total, so profound, it was deafening. Every guest was frozen, their eyes flicking back and forth between my parents' horrified faces and my own. Calm, smiling one. And in that sudden, suffocating silence, I watched as the true value of their nest egg, their reputation, their social standing, their carefully constructed image sank like a stone. The silence stretched. It was a physical entity, a thick, heavy blanket that smothered the dying notes of the party. The chirping of crickets in the manicured bushes sounded like roaring lions. I watched the sea of faces before me, seeing the story click into place behind their eyes. The pity they had felt for me moments before was curdling, reforming, and being redirected with laser-like intensity at my parents. It was a spectacular, slow-motion social implosion, and I had simply provided the spark. Chad's face was a kaleidoscope of emotions, each one more horrified than the last. Confusion gave way to disbelief, then to a deep, ruddy, apoplectic rage. His mouth opened and closed silently, like a beached fish. Tinsley was worse. Her mask of social perfection had not just cracked. It had shattered, revealing the panicked, raw-nerved woman beneath. Her skin, so carefully tanned and moisturized, seemed to shrink against her skull. Her eyes were wide with a terror that had nothing to do with finances and everything to do with status. It was Cynthia Weatherbay who broke the spell. She cleared her throat, a small, delicate sound that seemed to echo across the lawn. She turned to me, her face a carefully neutral mask, but her eyes gleaming with the thrill of front-row seats to a Category 5 scandal. "Well, my goodness, Sloane," she said, her voice dripping with a newfound respect. "The Estellan Foundation, that's simply remarkable. Congratulations, dear." She then turned, giving my parents a wide berth as if they were suddenly contagious, and said to her husband, "Bob, I think I left the stove on. It was the signal. The dam broke." Suddenly, everyone remembered other appointments, babysitters. They had to relieve early morning meetings. The exodus was immediate and brutal. A flood of awkward goodbyes and hasty retreats. They offered me quick, sincere-sounding congratulations while studiously avoiding my parents' gazes. "Wonderful news, Sloane. Just wonderful. You must be so proud of yourself." The Estellan. My nephew tried for that one. Incredible. Each word of praise for me was a fresh slap in the face to my parents. Within 5 minutes, the lawn was empty. All that remained were the half-empty glasses, the wilting canapes, a few forgotten designer sunglasses, and the three of us standing in the wreckage of their perfect evening. The yacht, our nest egg, bobbed silently at the dock, a gleaming white elephant in the twilight. For a moment, the only sound was the caterers discreetly beginning to clean up in the background. Then Tinsley found her voice. It wasn't the airy, melodic voice she used for company. It was a screech, high and thin and full of vitriol. "How? Could you?" she shrieked, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "How could you do this to us, in front of all our friends? You humiliated us." My father finally found his voice, a low, guttural roar. "Humiliated? She destroyed. Yusu? Do you have any idea what you've done, Sloan? You made me look like a fool, like a liar. A strange, almost giddy sense of calm washed over me. The storm had finally broken, and I was standing in its eye untouched. You are a liar, I said, my voice quiet, reasonable. It made. Their shouting seemed even more unhinged. You both are. You lied to my face. You told me you were broke. It was a figure of speech. Chad bellowed, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. It's complex financial planning you wouldn't understand. We were protecting our assets. You were protecting your yacht, I corrected him gently. You valued this thing more than my future. You made that choice. Not. You are your parents. Tinsley cried, tears of rage and self-pity streaming down her face, leaving black mascara tracks in their wake. You are supposed to be grateful. We gave you everything. You gave me a childhood full of expensive things to make up for the fact that you were never really there, I said, the words coming out without heat, just a simple statement of fact. You gave me a college fund that came with strings. You were willing to cut the second they interfered with your lifestyle. Gratitude? I owed you gratitude for that? No, I owed it to myself to succeed despite that. I looked from her face to my father's. You didn't embarrass yourselves tonight. Your actions did. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see. That was it. I had said my piece. The argument was pointless. They would never see my side because doing so would require a level of self-awareness they simply did not possess. To them, the crime wasn't the lie. The crime was getting caught. I'm leaving, I said simply. What do you mean, you're leaving? My dad scoffed. Where are you going to go? I'm going back to my dorm, I said. I'm going to pack the rest of my things from my room. I'll arrange for a shipping service to pick them up next week. You don't have to worry about it. I turned to walk back into the house. My mother grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. You can't just walk away, Sloan. This is your home. We are your family. I looked down at her, hand on my arm, then back up at her face. Her expression was desperate, pleading. But it wasn't love I saw there. It was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of what the neighbors would say. I gently removed her hand from my arm. A family doesn't do what you did, I said, my voice soft but final. And this isn't a home. It's a house. I'm going to go build a real life now. The one I earned? I walked away, leaving them standing there on the patio, too small. Pathetic figures dwarfed by the monument to their own selfishness. I didn't look back. My childhood bedroom felt like a museum exhibit dedicated to a girl I barely knew. The pink walls, the horse show ribbons, the collection of snow globes on the dresser. It was a room built by my mother's idea of what a daughter should be, not by the woman I had actually become. Packing was a cleansing ritual. I worked with a quiet, efficient focus. I put my books, my academic awards, and a few small, genuinely sentimental items into boxes. Everything else, the designer clothes I never wore, the dolls I never played. With the trappings of a life that had never fit, I piled in a corner for donation. With each item I packed, I felt lighter. I was curating my own life, deciding what was worth keeping. My parents never came upstairs. I could hear their muffled, angry voices rising and falling from their master suite down the hall. They were arguing, blaming each other, the caterers, the economy, anyone but themselves. The next morning, with my suitcases packed and waiting by the door, I made one last call. Dr. Sharma, Sloan, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. How did it go? I gave her the abridged version, the speech, the announcement, the mass exodus, the confrontation. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, her voice full of a firm, unwavering warmth, "Listen to me, Sloan. Do not let them make you feel guilty. You didn't destroy a bridge. You just stopped holding up your end of a bridge they had already set on fire. There's a difference. Thank you, I whispered. I needed to hear that. You are stepping into your own power, Dr. Sharma said. It will feel turbulent at first, but soon it will just feel like solid ground. Call me. When you get back to campus. As I was about to leave, I saw a white envelope had been slipped under my door. My mother's elegant, loopy handwriting spelled out my name. I opened it. It wasn't an apology. It was a final desperate attempt at manipulation. Sloan, I don't know how we will ever recover from the cruel public spectacle you made last night. Your father is devastated. He has locked himself in his office and won't speak to me. I hope you're happy with what you've done. To this family. Mom, I read the note and I felt nothing. The words had no power over me anymore. They were just ink on paper. I crumpled it up and dropped it into the donation pile. I wheeled my suitcases downstairs. The house was silent. As I reached the front door, my father appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked haggard, his face pale and puffy. You know, he said, his voice raspy, that Estellan scholarship, it's a tough one to get. I made a few calls for you a while back, pulled some strings, got your name on the right list. It was the most pathetic lie I had ever heard. A last desperate attempt to claim some ownership of my success to reassert his power. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. I stopped, one hand on the doorknob, and looked up at him. No, you didn't, I said, my voice devoid of anger or argument. It was a simple statement of fact. But thank you for making it so abundantly clear why I have to leave. I opened the door and walked out into the bright morning. Sun, not looking back as the door clicked shut behind me. The Uber was waiting. As we pulled away, I glanced back at the big, white, sterile house one last time. It wasn't my home. It was just a building where I used to live. 2 years later, the air was thick with the scent of salt and sulfur. The sky above the Galapagos Islands was a brilliant, impossible blue, dotted with frigate birds soaring on the thermal winds. I stood on the deck of the RV Odyssey, a state-of-the-art research vessel holding a tablet that displayed the real-time sonar feed from the deep-sea drone we had just deployed. We were mapping a volcanic vent field, searching for undiscovered chemosynthetic life forms. This was my office. My home, my life. It was more incredible than I had ever dreamed. I was part of a team respected for my mind and my work. I was contributing to something real, something bigger than myself. The Estellan Foundation had not just given me an education. It had given me the world. My satellite phone pinged with a notification. An email. I glanced at the sender. Tinsley Carmichael. My mother. I hadn't heard from them in over a year, not since the terse, formal emails about the shipping of my belongings. Curiosity got the better of me and I opened it. The tone was alien. All the exclamation points, the breathless drama, it was all gone. It was subdued, almost normal. Sloan, I hope this email finds you well. I saw an article online about your research. It sounds very impressive. Your father and I sold the house last year. We've downsized. We sold the boat too. It was just too much upkeep. I was just thinking of you and wanted to say hello. Mom, I read the email twice. It was just too much upkeep. A world of defeat and consequence was packed into that one sentence. They had lost the battle to maintain the appearance of wealth. The house, the boat, the lifestyle. It had all crumbled, just as I suspected it would. The nest egg was empty. I looked away from the phone, out at the vast, shimmering expanse of the Pacific Ocean. I thought about replying. What would I even say? I'm sorry to hear that. I wasn't. I told you so. It felt unnecessary. The truth was, her message stirred nothing in me. No anger, no satisfaction, not even sadness. It was like reading a dispatch from a distant country I had once visited a long, long time ago. It had no bearing on my current location. One of my colleagues, a brilliant geochemist named Ben, came over and stood beside me at the railing. "Anything good on the sonar?" he asked, nodding toward my tablet. "Just some noise," I said, and with a flick of my thumb, I archived my mother's email without replying. The message disappeared. I turned my attention back to the screen, to the ghostly, beautiful landscape of the deep ocean floor, to the work that mattered, to the future I was building, one discovery at a time. "Okay," I said, a real smile spreading across my face. "Let's see what's down there." I was free. "Excellent. I will expand on the story of Sloane by detailing the immediate aftermath of the party and the subsequent downfall of her parents, Chad and Tinsley. We will see the consequences of Sloane's announcement unfold, adding a new layer to her victory. Silent Sloane left behind on the patio was a vacuum, sucking all the air and warmth from the space. For a long, stunned moment, Chad and Tinsley simply stood there, frozen amidst the debris of their party. The cheerful bubble of light from the house seemed to mock them, illuminating the abandoned glasses and smeared plates. The yacht, our nest egg, rocked gently at the dock, its gleaming white hull now looking less like a symbol of success and more like a tombstone for their reputation. The spell was broken by the clatter of a catering assistant stacking plates. The sound, so mundane, so normal, was an obscenity in the funereal quiet. It made Tinsley flinch as if she'd been struck. Her head snapped toward Chad, her eyes, stripped of all social grace, were narrowed slits of pure fury. "Well?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "Aren't you going to say something, Mr. Prudent Financial Planning?" Chad, who had been staring blankly at the space where Sloane had stood, turned to her. His face was pale, his bravado utterly gone, leaving behind the weak, frightened man he'd always been underneath. "What do you want me to say, Tins?" he mumbled, running a shaky hand through his hair. She set us up? Set us up?" Tinsley's laugh was a sharp, ugly bark that held no humor. "Oh, she set us up, all right. And you walked right into it, you peacock? You just had to make a speech, didn't you? You just had to stand there and bloviate about tough decisions and sacrifice." "I was creating a narrative," he shot back, his voice rising with defensive anger. "That's what you do. You control the story." "You didn't control anything," she shrieked, taking a step toward him, her finger jabbing the air. "You gave her the perfect opening. You handed our daughter, our spiteful, ungrateful little viper of a daughter, a golden microphone, and you let her broadcast our private business to the entire world. Your daughter?" He sputtered. "Suddenly she's my daughter?" "Last I checked, you were the one who had to have the little heart-to-heart with her. You were the one who couldn't wait to cut her off so you could have a bigger budget for your ridiculous handbags. Don't you dare bring my accessories into this. I'll bring whatever I want into this." He roared. "This is my house." "My boat. A house we're going to be laughed out of. A boat that has made us the punchline of the entire Gold Coast." They stood there, panting, their faces inches apart, the ugly truth of their marriage laid bare now that they had no audience to perform for. Theirs was a partnership of convenience and mutual social climbing. With the latter kicked out from under them, all that was left was the raw, grasping greed and the frantic need to blame someone, anyone else. They didn't mourn the daughter they had lost. They mourned the status she had stolen from them. Vol's social fallout was not a slow leak. It was a catastrophic explosion. The next morning, Tinsley awoke to a barrage of text messages. They all started the same way. "Tins, darling, just checking in. Heard things got a little dramatic last night. Hope you're okay. Call me." It was a piranha-like feeding frenzy disguised as concern. She knew that Cynthia Weatherby and the others weren't calling to offer support. They were calling to get the story, to pick the bones of her humiliation clean, to gather every salacious detail so they could whisper about it at their Pilates classes and charity luncheons. The thought of it made her feel physically ill. For the first time in her adult life, she was not the one in on the joke. She was the joke. For Chad, the repercussions were more tangible. His 9 a.m. tea time with a potential real estate investor was canceled via a curt text message at 8:45. Sorry, Chad, something's come up. Let's reschedule down the line. Chad knew what down the line meant. It meant never. It meant I heard you're a broke, lying fool who got publicly pantsed by his own daughter, and I'm not tying my money to a sinking ship. The following weeks were a masterclass in social death. They were quietly disinvited from the annual Children's Hospital Gala, a B-list event they had clawed their way into co-chairing. The official reason was a change in the event's programming. The real reason was that the primary benefactors didn't want their cause associated with the tawdry drama of the Carmichael family. When Tinsley tried to book her regular table at their favorite waterfront restaurant, the Mater D, who had been fawning over her for years, suddenly sounded cool and distant. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carmichael, he'd said. We're fully booked for the next 3 weeks. Tinsley had asked, her voice trembling with indignation. It's a very busy season, he'd replied, the lie sitting comfortably. In his mouth, they were pariahs. Their friends would cross the street to avoid them at the local farmers market. Their calls went unreturned. The world they had built, a world that ran on the fuel of reputation and the illusion of success, had ground to a halt. They were still rich on paper, but they had lost their currency. They were socially bankrupt. The social bankruptcy inevitably led to the real thing. Chad's business was a house of cards built on handshakes, golf course chatter, and the perception of being a winner. He wasn't a brilliant developer. He was a salesman who sold people on the idea of himself. And now no one was buying. Deals that had been all but certain suddenly evaporated. Partners pulled out. Investors stopped returning his calls. The constant stream of easy money that had funded their lifestyle slowed to a trickle, and then stopped entirely. The bills, however, did not. The yacht was the first and most obvious casualty. It sat at the dock, a floating monument to their hubris, costing them thousands every month in insurance, fuel, and docking fees. It was no longer a pleasure craft. It was an anchor dragging them down. We have to sell it, Tinsley said. One evening, staring out the window at the boat, her voice flat and dead. No, Chad said instantly, defensively. It's an asset. It's a hemorrhage, Chad, she snapped, whirling to face him. It's the reason we're in this mess. We have to get rid of it. We need the cash. If we sell it now, we'll take a huge loss, he argued, though his voice lacked conviction. And it'll just prove everyone right. Everyone is right, she screamed. We're drowning. Don't you get it? The party is over. The process of selling the yacht was a unique and exquisite form of torture. The broker they hired was condescending, his eyes full of pity. The only offers they received were insulting lowballs from buyers who could smell their desperation. They finally sold it for 60 cents on the dollar to a tech mogul from California who smirked through the entire transaction. But the money from the yacht wasn't enough. The debt was too high, their overhead too extravagant. The next domino to fall had to be the house. The sprawling, white modernist box that had been the stage for their entire social life. Putting it on the market was the ultimate admission of defeat. Tinsley had to endure the indignity of open houses, of strangers walking through her living room, judging her taste, peering into her closets. Worse, she had to endure the sight of her former friends driving by slowly, their faces pressed to their car windows, gawking at the for sale sign on the lawn like it was a roadside attraction. They sold the house and almost everything in it. They were forced to enact the very future they had so blithely prescribed for Sloane. They downsized. Their new home was a condo in a bland, anonymous complex 20 miles inland. It was nice. Enough. But it was a pathetic shadow of their former life. Tinsley's oversized, modern furniture looked absurd in the small, boxy rooms. Her massive, abstract painting, the significant investment, wouldn't even fit on the main wall. She tried to hang it, but it looked ridiculous, a chaotic slash of red mocking her shrunken world. Chad spent his days on the sofa, watching. Financial news and nursing glasses of whiskey, a ghost haunting the ruins of his own ambition. Tinsley wandered the cramped rooms, touching the few expensive objects she'd managed to keep, her movements slow and aimless. The fight had gone out of them. All that was left was a thick, suffocating blanket of failure. One evening, Tinsley sat at a small desk wedged into a corner of the living room, a space she bitterly referred to as the world headquarters. She had been scrolling online, a masochistic habit she'd developed, when she came across an article in a scientific journal's online magazine. It was a feature on promising young researchers. And there was Sloane's face, smiling, confident, standing on the deck of a ship. The headline read, "A Stellan Fellow Sloane Carmichael charts new depths in marine discovery." Tinsley stared at the picture of her daughter, a person who now seemed like a complete stranger. She was thriving. She was brilliant. She was successful. She had won, utterly and completely. And in that moment, sitting in her downsized life, surrounded by the ghosts of a life she had lost, Tinsley felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't love, not exactly. It wasn't even remorse. It was a primal, desperate instinct. The instinct of a drowning person reaching for a life raft. Her daughter, the one she had cast aside, was now the only successful, reputable person she was connected to, her last remaining asset. With trembling fingers, she opened her email. She stared at the blank screen for a long time, trying to find the right words. The old words, the words of command and manipulation and fake effusiveness, were useless now. She had no power, no leverage. All she had was the truth of her defeat. She began to type. "Sloane, I hope this email finds you well. I saw an article online about your research. It sounds very impressive. Your father and I sold the house. Last year, we've downsized. We sold the boat too. It was just too much upkeep." She paused, the words hanging there, a pathetic monument to all they had lost. She finished with the only thing she had left to offer. "I was just thinking of you and wanted to say hello." "Mom," she hit send before she could lose her. Nerve, her heart pounding with a strange, unfamiliar mix of hope and shame. She had cast her message in a bottle out into a vast and different ocean, praying for a sign of land. Thousands of miles away, on the deck of the RV Odyssey, Sloane read the email. She saw the years of failure and regret packed between the lines. She understood, with perfect clarity, the desperation that had motivated her mother to write it. She pictured her parents in a small condo, their big lives shrunken, their social world collapsed. She felt a brief, clinical pang of something that might have been pity. Then she looked up from her phone. She saw the endless blue of the Pacific, felt the warm sun on her face, and heard the excited chatter of her colleagues as they analyzed. A new stream of data. This was her world. This was her family. This was her future. The past was a foreign country. With a flick of her thumb, she archived the message. It vanished from her screen. She took a deep breath of the clean, salt tinge air and turned back to her work, her mind already on the mysteries waiting in the dark, silent world below.